Oh boy, here we are at the very end of the Cubs season. And hi, everybody. We are Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast. I am Kevin McCaffrey, one of the hosts. The other one is over here. Look at this. It's Adam Amawala.
Look, I'm just hoping that we get rained out of the end of this podcast and just decide to call it a wash.
just cut it off. However many minutes in, we'll just get to a point. We'll go, I don't know, technically we're winning this podcast. I guess it's not a competitive endeavor, really, but it doesn't matter. So shut it down. Just cut it off in the middle of a sentence.
Hey, Kevin, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
If you were a needlessly salty White Sox fan and wanted to harass us in our DMs, where could you do that?
You could do that several places. You could do it at Away Games Pod on Twitter. And if you are a salty White Sox fan who would like to harass us, you've got a lot of stuff taking up your mind space right now. So this is helpful. It's the same. It's Away Games Pod on Instagram, too. You don't have to memorize a new thing to hate. It's just at Away Games Pod, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. And yeah, you can DM us. You can at us. I always hate when people say something, don't at me. Then don't put it on the internet. At me. Go ahead and at me.
Big Len Casper energy on that one.
Absolutely big Len Casper energy, who we love, but yeah, as we've said before, every day on Twitter, it's like it's his first day on Earth. Certainly the first day on Twitter. He's just like, why are people mad? It's like, shut up. You know what you did. So yes, feel free to add us at any of those places.
Well, I guess we are here to officially recap a very bummer season. I mean, there's no other way to describe it, really.
Yeah.
Before we get into kind of overall thoughts on the season, did anything from the final week of games stick out to you, positive or negative?
Not really, I don't think. I mean, it was... I guess it's nice to win the last game of the season. Would have been nice to beat the Cardinals in any game that could have sort of mattered for the Cardinals, right. Because that was sort of the only thing remaining. And it was, like a few years ago, it was fun. There was a game that didn't particularly matter for the Cubs at that point, but they got to end the Cardinals season with, wasn't like
Leonis Martin robbing a home run.
Yes,
we were watching it with Ken at your apartment.
That's right. So like that it would have been nice to have something along those lines, but alas, the Cubs got their asses swept in 4 games from the Cardinals when it mattered at Wrigley. So yeah, and then after that they won a shortened game where, as we said, it really was a perfect way to end the season, where it just rained and they were like, fuck it, we're done.
Yeah, I mean, and frankly, there was no reason to continue that game. Like, the last thing you want,
No.
And I say this as someone who despises the Cardinals, like, it would suck if, Nolan Arenado blew out his knee in a rainy game on the last day of the season when it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Also, but I will say the Happ game-winning home run was very satisfying. Good for him to get to 25 to get a personal best in home runs. He also crushed that ball, and I think that was my favorite part. Was, I guess it was Paul DeYoung, just pointing at the ball like it was a pop-up, and then it went over the batter's eye. Like, what was he watching?
Yeah, people make fun of Cubs fans, I feel like, disproportionately online for like cheering when the ball comes off the bat in the air, like thinking things are home runs all the time, which, by the way, every fan does. But apparently Paul DeYoung does the opposite of that. It's like 115 miles an hour off the bat at a perfect launch angle. And he's like, who's got I'm center fielder. I guess this is slightly beyond my shortstop range. It's like, yeah, Paul, it's a full baseball field past you. It was very... That was very fun to see.
Yeah, and then we did see some folks get called up. I guess there were a couple of people who got to, like, Trent Giambrone getting his first major league hit. Good for him. He's a guy who's been in the organization for a long time.
That was nice. And if people don't know Trent Giambrone, he's a fun guy. Sort of a smaller second baseman who has some power and some speed. Is it the best in the
Zach
National
Short
League?
type?
Yeah, Zach Short-esque. I would say he doesn't have the patience, the plate discipline that Zach Short has, nor does he have the defense. But he was, he's a middle infield guy, little pop, little speed. Didn't have a great year in the minors, but the Cubs, another perfect way. The Cubs, one of the few teams to not reach the vaccination threshold in a year when things sucked on the field. They sucked in the clubhouse too. They had a huge COVID breakout at the end of the year, which sort of led to the Cubs breaking the record for most players used in a Major League Baseball season on Earth, with 69 not nice, although it was nice for the people who got to have a Major League moment at the end. And I think that's a nice thing for you to point out.
Good for Giambroni, good for Eric Castillo, Trent Giambroni, not a jabroni. Want to point that out.
No, although when I was watching, I think it was 2 seasons ago, spring training, they announced his name, and my wife heard it in the background, was like, Trent Giambroni, and did they just call that guy a jabroni? No, but it's a fun name.
That's very much like something that like a minor league team would do, introducing an opposing player.
Yeah, right. If it's just like insult night at a minor league ballpark, basically.
When I used to go to Somerset Patriots games, which were at the time an independent league team, I think they may be affiliated with someone now, but they would play like silly songs for the opposing players. So when they everyone on the team would get to pick their own walk-up music, but then the opposing team, it would be like Miley Cyrus and NSYNC and whatever. So good, clean fun.
That is good, clean fun. Also, the Somerset Patriots sounds like the Facebook group that the Cubs listen to for vaccine advice.
The Somerset Patriots were for sure not in Somerset on January 6th. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, 100%. But I do think at the end of this year, that's a great thing. Watching Giambroni get his first major league hit. Too many Giambronis was a problem this year. But watching guys get, even if it wasn't a hit, a major league appearance at the end of a year that otherwise does not matter for competitive reasons, it matters in these guys' lives. They got to make the major leagues once. They got to suit up for the Cubs. It's an amazing thing, even if we wish all of them all the success with the Cubs and elsewhere. But like, even if they never reach the majors again, which some of them probably won't, that's a thing they'll get to look back on forever, and a little bit of joy that could come out of this season.
Dakota Mekkes got Moonlight Grammed. Just couldn't get him into a game.
Oh, I didn't even realize Mekkes got the call.
He was on the taxi squad, so he was with the team for the last 4 games. Okay. I listened to the compound, and he was talking about that. So he was there, but didn't get to go into a game. And unfortunately, he does kind of feel like a guy who, man alive, like if he couldn't get a call up this year, you got to think it might be tough for him to get into the majors. But then again, who knows? I mean, maybe he's someone who just like develops later.
It's frustrating to not get him in if he was there for 4 games. I mean, at this point, like nothing else matters. Just get everyone an appearance. It should treat it like an all-star game. I do think Mekkes has a chance. I don't know his numbers off the top of my head. I could look it up.
I think they were pretty good.
I think they were decent. They weren't he had basically 1 down year, and otherwise his numbers have been great in the minors. And I think this year they were fine. But I think he's a guy who I would not be surprised to see him be an effective major league reliever at some level. He's a guy who pitches with a ton of deception. He's huge. He's got like a funky delivery. That's part of it.
He doesn't throw like how you would expect someone that big to throw.
No, he's not like Trevor McGill heat. He's not bringing like 99. That's not it. But yeah, I mean, he is a guy who I think there's a decent chance we might see some of next year. Yeah.
So, I mean, usually on this episode every year, and I think we've hoped
season
that
review
this episode would be, I mean, we've hoped that this would be in November, and it has not been the case any of the time that we've been doing this podcast, so possibly our fault. But it's almost not even worth going back to our preseason predictions other than maybe record, because most of the people involved in the predictions are no longer on this team. Yeah,
that's that is true. We do every year our season preview podcast. We go through a list of a bunch of things and pick players, pick the team record predictions. And this year we were coming in eyes open, obviously, as I think most Cubs fans were, knowing, well, you can try to predict the wins, but it's kind of going to go one way or the other for the most part. It's like the players on the team are good. If they stay all year, they'll probably be decent, even if not excellent. But we thought, if they keep them, they'll be decent. But then there was that pesky 11-game losing streak at the exact worst time. That, I mean, what a butterfly effect, because the Cubs, I do believe, were about to buy at some level.
They were. I think when they no-hit the Dodgers in that combined no-hitter, I believe that brought them to 44-33, tied for first, and then they lost 11 straight. And the one that really was the killer, and I remember watching this game because it was like a Wednesday afternoon game, And actually, Ian Happ mentioned this. They were talking about like their best and worst moments of the year, and Happ's worst moment was recalling that 7-0 lead in Milwaukee in a game that the Cubs really needed to win. Like they lost 5 straight. I believe going into that series, they were down 3 games to the Brewers, lost the first 2, so they're down 5. And if they at least salvage the last one, then they're down 4, and maybe it's more manageable. But they did not. And in the first of 2 times, the Cubs gave up.
Excuse me, I am vaccinated.
In the first of 2 times that the Cubs gave up 15 consecutive runs this year, the Cubs lost 15-7 because Jake Arrieta could not find the strike zone in a game where literally all you have to do is find the strike zone. And after that, it was really over. Like you could see the season unraveling right there.
That was a game where I remember, because there's a monthly show I do in New York that I actually do put a lot of effort to. We've done for years, and it's great. I host.
Put effort into something. What a fucking hack.
Not a lot of things, but that, yeah. But it was our first. The show's called Serious Matters. It's like a variety and comedy show that I host, and we have a lot of great comics on it. And I was finishing up my segments for that, like basically desk pieces, and like sort of finishing writing and organizing things while I had the Cubs on my phone, just not watching the game, but I had the score right there that I would be periodically checking in on that day. And it was the first time I was hosting this show since before COVID, so it was like a lot. It was a busy day, a lot going on. And I remember seeing them jump out to 7-0 and being like, well, this is a great omen. And then Jake Arrieta losing it immediately. I mean, what? And Jake Arrieta, I think
the lead was gone by like the 2nd or 3rd inning.
It disappeared and kept going. As you said, 15 runs straight, giving up 15 consecutive runs. What is the equivalent of that in another sport? Is that like because in basketball, your team frequently gets to 100. In baseball, a team doesn't even frequently get to 15, much less consecutive. That's like the equivalent of, I don't know, a basketball 300-0 run. I mean,
it's a little bit like your beloved Notre Dame football team against the Badgers going into the 4th quarter tied and then outscoring them 31-3.
Yes, that exactly. It just comes out of nowhere, and just it was such a representative moment for this year in a poetically terrible way, where Jake Arrieta, a guy who was a huge contributor, one of the main guys to the Cubs' best era in modern history, he doesn't have quite the stuff he used to. Understatement, turns out. But all he has to do is gut through a game when the Cubs needed it most. And
go 5 or 6 innings, even if you give up 4 runs, the Cubs should be tacking on. That's fine.
You're fine. And he shit the bed so hard. And still, afterwards, a Jake Arrieta staple this year did not really take responsibility for it. With Jake Arrieta, is always, they hit the ball in the holes. I don't know, the ball found a place. I'm feeling good. Like, he never really took responsibility. And for anything, right? Even at the, his last mark as a Cub this year, he couldn't have gone out in a worse way, where he just repeatedly shit the bed from a performance standpoint, didn't get vaxxed, and then in a press conference, took time out to try to belittle, I think it was Bruce Levine, and asked him to take his mask off. He just being a bully, being someone who sucked at baseball and then was a bully this year, is how Jake Arrieta left the team, and then he was DFA'd the next day.
And then we saw him in Denver. That was strange.
Saw him in Denver for the Padres.
And the other thing about that's extra shitty is that the question that Levine asked him was actually a compliment. The question that it wasn't like, hey, you've been terrible, like, what gives?
Yeah.
The question was literally, how have you been able to continue mentoring these younger pitchers and helping them out, even if you're going through some struggles personally? Yeah. And Jake's response to that was, I'd love it if you could take your mask off.
Yeah. Jake, I'd love it if you could hang on to a 7-0 lead for 2 innings. Could you do that, Jake? There's a lot of things we would love for you to do. But yeah, that was, Jed Hoyer said that game specifically was the turning point. He said that tipped the scales for this year. And it felt like it in the moment, like, I think to all of us, it was like, okay, it's done.
And so much of this year just feels like ages ago. Like even,
Yeah.
thinking about like how annoyed we were with Eric Sogard and thinking
Yeah.
about some of those moments that were actually very fun early on in the season, the last of which of course was the combined no-hitter against the Dodgers, but even, the extended Rizzo at bat against
Mhm.
the Cardinals on that Friday when the Cubs swept that series, the
It
fact that
was
the Cubs
the first full
swept the
capacity,
Dodgers.
right? The first
Yeah,
full
yeah, yeah,
capacity
yeah.
getting back. Electric 14 pitch at bat. And
Right.
then, yeah.
Yeah, and we're recording this a week early, and as you are listening to this, I will be in the Dominican Republic on vacation, and God knows no one likes baseball there. But
Yeah.
when we booked that trip, it was like mid-June, and I remember having a conversation with my girlfriend where I was like, I can't wait for this trip. I'm going to be honest with you. If the Cubs are in the playoffs, I'm going to probably try to find a way to watch them. And that didn't seem like a crazy thing to plan for.
No.
And now I'm like laughing at myself actually going on this trip being like, was I delusional? But no, I mean, the Cubs were a fairly good team for the first few months of the year. And then when the wheels came off, they really, it wasn't like a blown tire. It was like literally all the wheels coming off of a car.
Yes, right. All the wheels clown-like exploding in different directions while it goes over a cliff and lands in a forest fire is what it ended up being. And yeah, it sucks because this team, I mean, we're trying to think of individually fun moments. The Rizzo at bat in that first game back at full capacity at Wrigley is one that comes to my head right away. The Javy and Wilson insanity in Pittsburgh, right, as a single moment.
Yep.
Was huge. And then
it broke that first baseman. He moved to Korea.
He literally moved to another hemisphere after that. RIP, unfortunately. But yeah, man, I mean, thinking about how realistic it was to think of the Cubs being in the playoffs. I'm looking at, I just picked out of a hat May 28th standings. The Cubs are right there in first place. You know who else was in first place? The New York Mets and the San Diego Padres. So how much things change, but that was a couple months into the season, that was that was not an insignificant part of the way into the year. And who's to say that, I mean, obviously I don't think any of us feel like the Cubs were a 95 win team or anything, but
no.
The Cardinals went on this bananas run at the end. And if the Cubs kept their good players, I don't think there's any reason to believe they wouldn't have ended up over 500. But yeah, instead, that one game, I mean, the 11-game losing streak, but really that one game, that 7-0 lead, not only led to everyone. Not only led to the losing season, but possibly led to the Cubs not having any player from this core, any of your Rizzo, Baez, Bryant, with the team ever again. Like, if the Cubs stayed in the race, I just think there's a much greater chance that one of them would still be here going forward too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and look, maybe the Cubs hold on and win that game in Milwaukee, and they're down 4 games, and then they still play 500 ball, or they still go on a losing streak, and everything ends up being the same. But it like that, it's rare in a season that you can look to a specific game and be like, this is the moment that everything changed.
Yeah,
and I think you and I are kind of in the same camp in terms of how we feel about the trade deadline, in the sense that, like, I mean, obviously it sucked, but I think our frustration was less with what the Cubs did in that moment and more with how it got to the point where that was necessary.
I'm sorry, say that again. I'm at my mom's in Elmhurst, and the Wi-Fi cut out for a second. Could we, in the Build Back Better plan, can we get improving your mom's Wi-Fi? This is a feeling.
I tell you what, the infrastructure at your mom's house is really lacking.
It's not great. You're in Elmhurst.
What I was saying was that I think you and I agree in the sense that what was so frustrating about the trade deadline playing out the way it did was not the context in which it happened, but the fact that we got to the point where any of that was necessary.
1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. And I think we could talk about this in depth for a long time. And we could do that a little bit right now. But like the fact, there never should have been a point where we're going into a year where Baez, Bryant, and Rizzo were all free agents. You need to pick one of these very good players, extend them to have a little stability going forward, to have a little bit of stability going forward. And the fact that this front office and ownership group could not come to an agreement with any of these guys is an indictment on them. I just don't believe that all those guys were uniquely unreasonable beyond any other kind of player. I don't believe that. And when another turning point in this Cubs era to me was the offseason when Manny Machado and Bryce Harper were free agents. And we all know Bryce Harper wanted to come here to Chicago. And the Cubs did not.
We knew it.
That.
Charles Meow knew it. Everybody knew it.
Everybody knew it. That damn cat. Everyone knew it. And when the Cubs went cheap that offseason, that in hindsight was a sign going forward, because we were the only reason we could justify as fans the Cubs not going in to put a final piece on and strengthen that championship core would be, okay, well, maybe this means that they'll be able to have the flexibility to extend more guys from this core. And then their biggest positional spending is on Daniel Descalso. The only extension that they come to with a position player of any in any meaningful way was David Bodie, who hits absolute missiles into the dirt 1 foot in front of him all the time. God bless. I'm still holding out hope for David Bodie. And then Kyle Hendricks, who took a deeply under market deal. And I don't know how we're supposed to trust the people who got us here from a championship core in a major money-making market to take us forward. It's incompetence.
And that was going into 2018, was it not?
Yeah, it was. Yes, it was.
So, and that's to that end, I guess even though I don't agree with it, I could understand the mindset of, say, after like a 2019 where the team just collapses down the stretch, saying, okay, clearly, perhaps this is an indication that we can't rely on this same core to get the job done because they have not done it when it really mattered, right? But in 2017, you're coming off 3 straight LCS appearances,
3 straight Final Fours,
including a World Series championship. So what more indication do you need if you're the Ricketts to keep putting money into an already very good team?
Yeah. This was, I mean, Bryce Harper, I guess 2018, I'm saying with 2018 into 2019, but 2018 right. was a team that, that was the year. Yeah.
Well, I mean, 18 going into 18 was the year that the Cubs tried to jump the market and sign Tyler Chatwood.
Tyler Chatwood, yes, exactly. Yeah. Tyler Chatwood was what was the big addition there, and that was dicey. And then, I don't know. I get, and then ultimately, I guess Darvish was the biggest signing that that was made after that point. But yeah, I think in hindsight, they just didn't. The fact that they didn't add that final piece. And they didn't. It would have been much better to trade one of this core group for any value to shake things up, as opposed to just run them all to the end and get the least you could possibly get for them at the end.
Or let people like Schwarber and Lester walk.
Yes, let a guy like Schwarber walk for nothing to basically save $2 million to sign Jack Peterson on a 1-year deal. And that was the thing. Today we're also speaking. We're recording this. It'll come out a little later, but we're recording this the day that of Jed Hoyer giving the end of season press conference. And the funniest part of the press conference to me was when they were talking about leadoff hitter philosophy, and Jed was like, "That's something I'm still upset about. People being like, oh, Schwarber, it's such a failure in the leadoff role, and he's killing it in Washington and Boston all year." And I'm like, is your I told you so moment is bragging about how a player is good who you cut to save $2 million? Yeah, Jed, where's he good? Not here. So this isn't really the own that you think it is, it's back to your original point. It's just like you almost couldn't construct a worse run series of events to get us to this point.
Yeah, quick question. If you hit a 98-mile-an-hour fastball from Garrett Cole at your eyes, 435 feet to right field, is that good?
That is good. We have a referee off to the side. We have an umpire, and this is officially good. That's a good thing to do.
God damn it.
You know who else homered in the wild card game was Anthony Rizzo. Bent to homer around that right field pole. But yeah.
That was the Yankees scoring.
Yeah, that was the
Well, actually, I guess Stanton got one at the end, but
yeah, Stanton was just had a personal vendetta with the Green Monster in that wild card game, was just
Jesus
absolutely
Christ.
beating it up. But I mean, there are Cubs still on the team going forward who did play on the team in the second half of the year, but obviously we have to talk about the Cubs that left, because that is such a huge story about this team this year and going forward.
Well, let's start with this, right? Who
Yeah.
is unequivocally, absolutely on this team next year?
I think there's a good number of guys. There's let's start with whose roles are defined.
Sure.
Kyle Hendricks in the starting rotation. Wilson Contreras is your catcher. And would it shock me if they traded him this offseason? It would not. But I think those are literally the two players whose roles going forward on this team. And then also you could say like Cody Hoyer is going to be in that bullpen. Rowan Wick's going to be in that bullpen. Nick Madrigal, it seems like, is getting the run as the starter at second base. Beyond that, I mean, Frank Schwindel is going to be on the team. Wisdom is going to be on the team. Ian Happ, if he's not traded, and then you got your young trio of pitchers. Probably you've got Keegan Thompson, Edbert Alzolay, and Justin Steele are going to be they're going to be on the major league team in some fashion. We don't know whether that's starter, reliever, whatever. But and Frank Schwindel, if I didn't say that already, is going to be on the roster somewhere, whether that's DH, because there's a good chance we're going to have the DH going forward in the National League, or whether that's a full-time first baseman.
Yeah.
I mean, of the who did you enjoy from this crew of the Cubs who are going forward into next year as Cubs? Who did you enjoy the most in this second half?
I mean, obviously, I think Schwindel and Wisdom are kind of the consensus people to mention, at least offensively. It's one of those things where, kind of like a David Bodie, you want to know how real it is going forward and what kind of adjustments people will make. I actually think that Schwindel has a better chance of being like a consistent starting major leaguer than Wisdom. And perhaps that's wrong, but like Schwindel's bat to ball skills and just his like basically uncanny ability to just hit everything in sight. I feel like there's a shot that maybe the Cubs have stumbled into like a DJ LeMahieu or something like that. That's certainly the ceiling.
DJ LeMahieu is a very interesting comp there. And DJ obviously has defensive value that Schwindel doesn't have, but a guy who just gets the bat to the ball, seems to put it on the grass, and then has a little bit of pop as well. I think that is probably that's what you're dreaming on there.
Right. And beyond that, I was impressed with Ortega. Like, I would be fine with Rafael Ortega being part of some sort of outfield platoon, depending on who else is added in the offseason.
I think that's a great point.
Hermosillo, same thing.
Yeah. Ortega, to me, that is a platoon outfield spot. That is, he hit really well. His overall stats fell off as the season went on a little bit, but his stats stayed hot against right-handed pitching. He was really good against right-handed pitching all year. And if you're talking about places where I think it would actually be reasonable to try to save a little money going forward, I'm not into this team saving money in any sense. I'm into this team. The only way I'm into this team saving money is to spend it somewhere else. And one place I think that it does make sense to do that is if you have Ortega as the left-handed hitter in a platoon with a right-handed guy, which could be Hermosillo, although we unfortunately didn't get to see enough of him at the major league level this year.
Yeah. But beyond that, I mean, I think Alfonso Rivas showed some signs, at least defensively. I was impressed by him. And then pitching wise, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious that Cody Hoyer was like the most impressive person that we saw out of that group. Obviously, it was fun to watch Steele, and good for him to end the season on clearly his best start as a major leaguer, far and away. I mean, 7 innings. He probably could have gone longer, but I don't necessarily disagree with Ross saying like, all right, he's pitched a beautiful game for 7 innings. Let's like get him into the offseason feeling really good about himself. Not to mention one of the most like impressive cat-like double plays I've ever seen a pitcher turn.
I had to watch it several times. I mean, to be like,
he threw that ball to second like 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, and his body angle was crazy on it. And I just really like Justin Steele's attitude, which feels like a really like almost regressive old school baseball scout thing. Like, you got to believe in him. He's got a hot girlfriend. He believes in himself. That's what that means. His handshake's strong, like that kind of shit. Like he just seems like fearlessly aggressive out there. And to be a rookie, pitching a really good game out there, and to make that decision to whip it to second from that angle, I don't think a lot of guys
takes a lot of confidence. Yeah.
This is a guy who believes in himself and who is also has plus athleticism, easy for me to say. And he like, I'm glad he got his hit too, as he said on this very podcast, he can rake. Yeah,
I believe he got a second hit as well.
Did he? Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, just stacking up those stats while
no dinger, but he got his hit.
He gives me a lot of confidence going into next year. And of those, and we saw Abbott have a lot of success in his short roll out of the bullpen at the end of the year too. Or I should say a little extended bullpen roll, but like, he was coming in as basically a piggyback, a 2-3 inning guy.
That seems to be a better fit based on what we saw this entire season. Like you cannot make the case for Abbott to have certainly not a guaranteed rotation spot, and probably not a rotation spot period, just based on what we saw. And that's not, it's not being mean. It's just kind of based on results.
Yeah, I would say definitely for my money, you cannot count on Abbott locking down a starting spot going forward. And I think that applies to so many people on this team. I think and that is something Hoyer said, where he's like, we don't know what role, insert name here, is going to have. And that makes me think of this pitching trio, where if you have Keegan, Steele, and Abbott all with starting rotation spots, that means something went wrong, or the Cubs aren't acting like a major league team from a major market. That doesn't mean I don't believe all those guys can start. It just means that it should not be counted on. They should have to force their way into that rotation. And Abbott, I think at the end of the year, he was part of the reason he was taken out of the rotation was for innings load management, because he just hadn't reached that level of innings before. And maybe he found a little something there, because he did look better overall. And that would be great to see going forward. But you've got to get those guys have to force themselves into spots. And on the offensive side, I would say the same thing about a guy like Nico Hoerner.
Yes, I think, yeah. Where do you land with Nico? Like, I think I'm sensing that you don't feel like he should just, like, by default have a starting job necessarily, and certainly not a shortstop.
No, I do not. And Nico has just not been able to stay healthy, for one thing, which that could just be a terrible run of bad luck that he gets over, hopefully.
He's too jacked.
Too jacked. Honestly, man, there was during the Jed Hoyer press conference today, a real journalist asked, "Is Nico too thick?" Which was a fun question to ask. Does Nico need to take one of the C's off how thick he is now? That's excuse me. Christian Amanpour, CNN, just checking in real quick. Is my man too many C's on that thing? I think like he is a guy who got rushed through necessity. Everyone likes him. He brings skills to the table, but he also hasn't hit a home run in several years, and that's troubling. He hasn't stayed healthy. We know he's a Gold Glove second baseman, but that's like one of the only roles it seems like we've got locked up, because that's the only place Madrigal can play for the moment, unless he starts taking left field reps or DHing or something. I think on a contending team, Nico has to force his way in. It has to be like a Brock Holt situation or something. It seems like a guy who's sort of a super sub. He's athletic. He can cover a lot of places defensively.
Yeah, I like that.
And if he's like hitting, and if he develops as a hitter, well, yeah, we can. That's a guy. Then that's a guy who can be in your starting nine on a regular basis. But we can't count on it.
Right. Well, and it's nice to see the Cubs have finally groomed some homegrown pitching talent. After a long time. And if you need to groom your talent, what would you do?
Yes. What a guy. He nailed it. I would go to Manscaped. Honestly, I'd go to manscaped.com, and I would, I'd much like I'm taking 20% of the hair off my body. In this case, I'm taking 20% off the price I pay for the implements by using the promo code Away Games. And you guys can do that. Go to Manscaped. You can get your lawnmower 4.0. You can get boxer shorts that Adam gives rave reviews to. And you can knock 20% off by using the promo code AWAYGAMES at Manscaped.
Free international shipping.
Wherever
you might be.
Get groomed in Croatia listening to a baseball podcast. Do it.
Yes. Yeah, please do, and you will support the Cubs by doing so, and use promo code AWAYGAMES for those purposes. Speaking of players being groomed, who are we seeing next year? We seeing Brennan Davis? We seeing DJ Hers? Who are we seeing?
Adam Mamawala is on a 15-0 scoring run here with the segues. I think going into next year, if as long as he's playing like he was playing this whole year, we are going to see Brennan Davis probably sometime in the midsummer. And I think once he comes up, you want him playing most of the time. But I think we could end up seeing Brennan Davis be part of that platoon split with Rafael Ortega if this team is contending. But I think, this is the thing. And this is why I'm so heavy on the Cubs needing to spend significantly and at least on a couple of top end free agents this year, because the guys I expect to pop up next year are not many. We talk about the excitement about this farm system, and it's an exciting farm system for 2024, maybe for 2025, possibly. So the guy, as far as who we're going to see pop up next year, I mean, Brennan Davis is the only name I'm thinking of. I think like Miguel Amaya
pitching wise.
Pitching wise, I think we've seen it's kind of more of the same in a good way with the three, with Keegan and with Keegan, Steele, and Adbert. We could see a little bit more of Corey Abbott, possibly. He didn't have a great year at AAA, but he was the Cubs pitcher of the year before that in the minors. So Corey Abbott's a guy we could see pop up who, again, is sort of like maybe a back end starter guy, or maybe maybe he fits in that bullpen somewhere too. I am not the most optimistic on our big flame throwing boy, Braylon Marquez. I just think when you keep coming into seasons and things keep being wrong, whether it's conditioning, whether it's, I believe he got COVID this year too, which that's not necessarily his fault, but Braylon's a guy where it's like, you missed the whole year, and you kind of like, it's been too long since we've seen him really string together anything consistent. So there's a good chance we could see Braylon Marquez in the bullpen maybe at the end of next year, but I'm just not counting on it, really. And the one other name I'll throw out there is Ryan Jensen. Ryan Jensen was the Cubs first round pick a couple years ago, flame throwing righty up to 99 out of Fresno. And he started a little rough. He had some very rough games early, but then he strung together a really hot streak, and I believe finished at AA. And Ryan Jensen is someone I think we could see pop up next year in sort of a role like we saw Keegan, where it's bullpen first and then possibly starting.
Right. Now, did Hoyer, I didn't see the press conference, but did he specifically allude to the Cubs spending money?
Yeah, he did, but it's sort of like, I believe he talked around it in the same way where he was like, we have to spend, but we have to spend smart, where it's like, oh no, I thought we should spend dumb. That like, it's sort of like pushing against an argument no one's made. It's just like creating a guy, as they say on Twitter, where it's like you make up a guy to have a fight with, where he said several times too that it's like it doesn't do us any strategic favors to say how much we plan on spending, which is true. But you got to offer Arrieta like 5 years, 120 million, right? Yeah, exactly. Let's get this reunion right this time. Honestly, dude, I would say when we're coming down to borderline players, give me a vaccinated player at this point. I've had enough of this bullshit. Like, no Eric Sogard's coming in on the fringes here. If we're signing like bench dudes, can we just get past the goddamn threshold maybe, and not be the goofy like protesting at the school board meetings idiots of the major leagues like we were this year? That would be nice. He did, the one thing Hoyer did say was, he said specifically pitching, the starting pitching was not competitive this year. So it gives me a little bit of optimism. I'll give you, here's a nice prediction. I think the Cubs will sign one of the top end starters. Stroman? I hope so. I think he makes the most sense to me. But who else appeals to you? I will say the Cubs they were high on Gausman for a long time, even before his breakout, his like real breakout with San Francisco this year. But again, it's sort of like why I think Chris Bryant's a Giant for life. I just think Farhan Zaidi in San Francisco is too smart to let that guy go. So,
right. Is anybody else on your radar, or you think on the Cubs radar?
In terms of free agent stuff?
Starting pitchers specifically.
I mean, you've got Robbie Ray, who for me is like, if you get this year's Robbie Ray, give him all the years and all the money, sure. But Robbie Ray's sort of he's had like an excellent year before, and then a year where he was almost unplayable, So that scares me a little bit. But if you tell me the Cubs signed Robbie Ray, I'd be like, fucking great,
Yeah. Where do you stand on the tightness of his pants?
The tightness of his pants, I'm fine with, I would say. How about you? What is do you have like any vibe, any wish list particularly going in?
I think number one, I mean, it should go without saying that the Cubs need pitching and starting pitching specifically, because frankly, I think there is a world where you can make a pretty competitive bullpen out of the pieces we already have. I don't feel like we need to go out and seek like a top end closer. I would much rather that money is allocated towards starting pitchers. I would very much like to see, to your point, one of these top end guys, whether it's Stroman or Ray or Gausman, if somehow the Cubs can lure him away. And then at the very least, another pitcher who's like a 2-3.
Like a John Gray.
Yes, because like let's say that happens, right? Let's say the Cubs go into next year with Stroman, Hendricks, John Gray, and then some combination of the pieces we have. You can live with that, right? And then if you add a Castellanos and maybe one other significant bat, or like a top tier bat like Castellanos, and kind of, middle of the road, someone to platoon with Ortega, something like that. Like I think you could convince me that you're at least trying. Does that convince me that you're doing everything you could? Of course not. And I frankly don't think that's going to happen. Not necessarily because of Hoyer's fault, but because the Ricketts fucking suck butt. But
sucking.
They suck butt. But I will tell you that if the Cubs run out a dog shit team, I don't think people are going to go to Wrigley a whole lot next year.
No, I think they kind of proved that this year, which I'm totally fine with. And the only other the two beats I'll say just at the end of that, they need to have a top end starter. I feel confident that there's a decent chance they'll get one. But if they do not sign one of the higher end shortstops in the best free agent shortstop class ever and run Nico Horner out there, I am going to be apoplectic. I am going to be so furious about it, because that is not a contending that's not a top end market team at that point. You cannot do that. And emotionally, honestly, I want one of the Cubs back. I want one of the real ass Cubs back. I want to pick one. I want the good feeling of one of these dudes coming back. I think Javy's probably the most likely out of them, but I honestly don't think any of them are likely. It's just what I want.
Dream scenario, which shortstop do you want the most? We talking Simeon, we talking Story, we talking Javy, we talking who else is out there?
So this is what hopefully is a fun part of the Cubs offseason.
Oh, Correa, of course, too.
Correa, too. Story Seager, as you said. A fun part of this offseason is there actually are a lot of different ways to do this offseason right. There are a lot of different combinations, ways you can get there. And so when it comes to shortstop signings, to me, getting Baez back tells me that's also, you're spending less money than you would on Trevor Story. You're spending less money than you would on Corey Seager. I think Corey Seager is the best offensive fit for this team. But if you're telling me you're signing Javy Baez, I'm getting I think you're getting more sort of value for dollar, possibly more, because I think Javy's weaknesses are so glaring that in some ways his value is sneaky, Do you think
Javy can be had for, like, let's say, 4 years, 80 to 90 million?
I think it's going to cost more than that. But I do think it's going to be significantly less than a Story or a Seager. So when I'm saying I want Javy at short, that is all part of that is also saying that's because I also want a Castellanos. I also want a high end bat elsewhere with that money that you save by signing Javy Baez there. But otherwise, I mean, like you can if you tell me Marcus Semion's a guy who's a little older, coming off of 43, 45 home run season at
He was
second base,
unbelievable, and he played every single game.
Yeah, and so you've got that guy, and he also finished top 5 in the MVP race a couple years ago with Oakland. So this is a legit guy. Marcus Semion's a little older, so you could also go a route where you sign Marcus Semien for 4 years, and you sign Starling Marte for 4 years, and that now you
or
have
even maybe shorter years and bigger money.
Exactly, and then you cover this next window before the farm system we're talking about matures, because guys, this farm system is far away. I'm so glad if you're excited about Kevin Alcantara and Christian Hernandez. I am too. I love those guys. We're not seeing them for 3 or 4 years, so we have to set up a different major league team until they get here, and the Cubs need to take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think basically where you and I have landed is we want 2 top end bats. We want a top-end starting pitcher, and we want another starting pitcher who is good.
Yeah,
and then fill in the rest with flyers on people. That's fine.
with your smart money.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think so. I will say I remember one thing from I was just thinking of the preseason predictions we did, and for the season review, I think I did predict Jason Adam would be closing games after Kimbrel was gone, and Jason Adams' foot fell off, and then he got it back, and then he did close games at the end. So I weirdly got one super right. I want to say,
good for you. What else do we have? Does that pretty much do it?
I mean, yeah, I feel like it's natural to talk about going forward with this team so much, but just I guess like in a season review sense, is there, I mean, any memories you want to mention from this year? Any feelings, anything in person that was notable for you this year?
I mean, I did get to have a couple fun in-person moments because I saw them early enough in the season that it wasn't a waste of time. I was at the game in St. Louis. It was my first time seeing the Cubs since the pandemic began. And Javy hit a game-winning home run in extra innings in St. Louis. There was also that great appearance by Ryan Tepera where he got out of a bases-loaded, nobody out jam in like the 7th or 8th inning. That was really fun. Got to see a couple of the Mets games, including the one that Hendricks won, and also what I consider to be one of the strangest experiences I've ever had at a baseball game. I think you were there, but the game where DeGrom started and like it looked like he was going to throw a perfect game.
A perfect game, like 27 strikeout business.
Yes.
Like the most
like perfect game. I think he struck out like 8 in a row at one point. And then when he didn't come back out, I have never felt the air of a stadium go out more than that moment. Like, because I had already bargained with myself. Like, I'm okay with the Cubs losing if I get to see a perfect game, because I think that might be happening right now.
Yeah, I felt like that too. It's the Cubs had absolutely no chance. I think this was, remind me, was this, I was there too. Was this before everyone was traded? Because it was, right? Because Rizzo was the only one who didn't strike out in that first.
This was like June, I think. It was right. Yeah. Wasn't it around your birthday?
Yeah. So it was first time through the order. Rizzo didn't strike out. Everyone else did, I think. And as Cubs fans,
and then DeGrom drove in a run.
Yes. Against poor Robert Stock, who they did dirty.
Oh,
they did dirty that day, and then they got rid of him. And then he ended up with the Mets, actually. Like that was a distinct memory, and I think as Cubs fans we have sympathy for that, because I think the air went out of that stadium because it wasn't just sudden from DeGrom. It was like the arm was barking and he kept being like, I think it'll be fine, and it felt like it wasn't gonna be, and it was a very like old school Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood situation,
right? Yeah, it wasn't just that moment. It was like Mets fans being like, oh man, is this our season starting to slip away if he's actually hurt?
Yeah.
And I think that was like the second time that he had gotten hurt, and then I think the next time after that was when he pretty much was shut down for the whole season.
Then it was shut down for the year. Yeah.
I know you saw some not so fun games, including one of Hendricks' worst starts, but do you have like positive Cubs in-person memories from this year?
I saw the Sunday night game against the Braves when Hendricks, is my favorite Cubs starting pitcher of this era, had the worst game of his career to that point. Later in the year, Kyle challenged it with a game against Milwaukee. But I mean, did I have a good in-person memory this year? I don't know. I mean, I'm really just it was I guess it was nice to be back at Wrigley since it had been the longest I'd gone, but
Yeah.
then the Braves hit 4 homers in the first inning. So I mean, like, I don't know, like, not really. I guess there wasn't. I enjoy the games I went to. I enjoyed going to, I guess, but I think the most fun I had watching the Cubs all year. This is like sort of cheesy because it's the same. It's like the most obvious moment, but like I didn't get to be watching the Rizzo 14 pitch at bat live. I caught it on my phone later, but I was watching Javy going nuts against Pittsburgh. And that was like the main time this year where I got to do a thing that I like doing, where it's like something so fun happens with that Cubs group where I'm yelling. My wife is like, "What's happening?" And then I rewind it and then show it to my wife. I'm a 39-year-old man being like, look, Jamie, look, like in a childlike way.
Yeah.
And Javy doing that, getting caught in the rundown, fucking moonwalking, calling Wilson safe at the plate, and then running to second base was such a fun and exciting and purely good thing, and was like a perfect play to remember him by, if that is the last we see.
Yeah, and I'm also happy that he got his dramatic sac fly against Amir Garrett moment.
Oh yes, that's a good call. Sweeping them off the field with the bat.
I thought he was rowing a boat when he first did that. I had no idea what the hell he was doing.
Yeah, that's great. And then Javy's homer in St. Louis. Javy was the correct me if I'm wrong, he was the only one who got to play in the game before the trade deadline. Because
I think that's right. I know Rizzo and Bryant didn't. Yeah.
I don't want to close on a negative note, but that was unforgivable from David Ross to not get those two.
I don't care if you get them into the game and they just go out to their positions and then you take them both out. I get it. I get that you don't want them getting hurt. I understand that completely. Yep. But to not give them their moment after Joe Madden gave you a backup catcher your fucking moment. Get out of here.
Get the fuck out of here. Absolutely. Anyway, David Ross is gonna be extended soon. Fine, whatever. It's the opposite.
Is he actually?
Yeah. There's they're talking about an extension that would kick in after the 2023 season. So
I think we hire back Rick Renteria and then fire him before he even gets to manage again.
It's the only way to undo this new curse. Is make Ricky Renteria not done dirty.
Yeah, we get rid of him and then we resign Mike Quaddy.
Yeah. Good God. Let's not go back to that Cubs era. Let's hope, Adam, that this is the nadir. I don't like being negative. We don't like being negative, and sorry if it's felt too negative, but let's hope that this season was the nadir of our Cub fandom going forward, but especially as long as we're doing this podcast.
Now you're throwing a lot of words at me that I don't understand, and I'm gonna take them as disrespect. Watch your mouth and rephrase it.
Watch your mouth. Yeah.
What about Ralph Nadir, politician?
Yeah, just write him in as manager. Yeah.
Oh man, what a Jill Stein of a year.
Jill Stein,
just a fucking waste.
Just ruining, throwing the year away to spite us. Yes. All right. So anything else, Adam, before we close this up?
No, I mean, I feel like we did our best to be realistic about things this year. I don't feel like we're a downer podcast. I also don't feel like we're a irrationally positive podcast when it's not warranted, which is also as annoying as people being negative, if I'm being honest.
Yes, totally.
So
100%.
I mean, I've still, even in a shit year, I've still enjoyed doing this. And I also, like, if I'm looking for any small like glimmers of hope in the second half, like, it was awesome for these dudes that they had a 7-game winning streak. It was cool that Rafael Ortega hit that game-winning home run to end that horrible losing streak at Wrigley. It was cool that Hayward got to have another walk-off moment in what turned out to be the last Cubs win at Wrigley in like early September.
JFC, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a weird year because there's so much uncertainty, far more than there has been in any other year going into this offseason. But I am going to be cautiously optimistic that the Cubs, even if for no other reason than knowing that they want to make money, do the right thing and spend some this offseason. I'm gonna hope that is the case because there frankly is no excuse not to do that.
Nope. Yeah, out of self-preservation have some shame about it,
Mhm.
I think would be nice. And I am hopeful that'll happen. And this offseason can be very interesting. It can be
Mhm.
very interesting. Fun things can happen, and it can be exciting. And we
Yeah.
really hope it is, and we hope we have that fun stuff to talk about going forward.
Yeah, frankly, I feel like compared to off seasons past, however many 3 or 4 there have been since we started doing this, I feel like there will be more to talk about on a weekly basis or however often we do this moving
Yeah.
forward, because I do think that pretty soon into, I don't know, November, hopefully, unless it's like another molasses off season, there's going to be some interesting stuff happening. So let's hope that's the case. Trade for Shohei, do whatever you got to do.
100%. Let's roll up 21, turn that motherfucker sideways and stick it in a trash can. And let's move on to what should be, let's say, a very fun 2022. But yeah, thank you for listening all season, guys. And we will keep doing this podcast through the off season. So keep don't unsubscribe.
We're gonna try to slide into some more players' DMs. We're gonna try to get Steele back on for a "How was your first year in the big leagues" conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna try to get some folks on. So something to look forward to. And I think that's it. I'm gonna go hang out at Randy Rosario's house while he's in Japan.
Yeah, go give that another visit in the Dominican. And we'll catch you guys next week at Away Games Pod on everything. See ya.